Hello everyone, this is the 44th video of my database management systems question video series. In the previous video, we started and actually ended a question set about relational algebra, and the last video, I posted the last video, the video 43 as the previous video. Okay, today we are going to start a new set of uh, questions about DDL. DDL means data definition language. And if you can remember, in the previous videos, we use some tools to create our databases, SQL based databases like Workbench and MySQL. And also, we use queries to execute uh, data. We create tables and enter data using queries and search data like that. We use SQL queries to do that part, and also we use the graphical method using the Heidi SQL and Workbench software. But in this case, uh, in the DDL language, the data definition language is the language which will use in which will use in those softwares we use, Workbench and ADSQL browser. When we do any action, when we command any action like creating a database in Workbench or ADSQL browser, we do that using the GUI graphically. But when we create those database graphically, what actually happen in the software is it's going to use the DDL language and create a query to command the MySQL server to create database and execute that query. So we are not going to use uh, any tools in this set of videos. We are going to use the DDL language directly and try to create databases and tables and attributes like that. So let's see how we are going to do that. Let's jump into our question set 44. Okay, here's the question. The principal of Ranabima School in Kandy intends to create a software to enter the information of teachers and students in that school. You are entrusted with the task of creating this software. Your team is tasked with developing the database of this software. Database development work is shared between you and everyone on the team. You are tasked with storing student and teacher information, creating the table needed to store the subjects that teachers teach and subject that students learn. Use the instructions below to create it. Okay, here's the first task. Create a database using the name of the school database as Ranabima SCHDB. Use DDL Query to create this database. Okay, they directly told us to use DDL query, not a software or a MySQL query. So let's see how we are going to do that. Okay, here you can see in the right side of the screen, this is the command line. You know the command CMD, but in this case, when we install uh, MySQL server, uh, install uh, a set of softwares like the MySQL server itself and also the Workbench software, and there are some services like command line client and command line client with Unicode like that. Today we are going to use the command line client. It's also the CMD. The difference is we don't have to write uh, anything uh, like uh, selecting the path to our MySQL server and then execute like that. If you use the command line client, it will directly give access to your MySQL server, and we can start executing DDL queries. And this terminal is specially created for those commands, and let's see how we are going to do that. Here you can see in the first line, you can see it asks to enter the uh, password to access my MySQL server. So I gave it the password, and then here you can see we are in my MySQL server. Now we can execute our query. So let's see what's the first question. As the first question, here we have to create a database called Ranabima SCHDB. Okay, in DDL, we can command the database to create database, and we can give it a name. Okay, Ranabima SCHDB, and we can execute. You can see query okay, one row affected. That means our query executed without any errors. And let's see whether actually our database is created or not. To do that, we can simply command show databases, and here you can see it's showing a list of the list of databases in my uh, MySQL server. Okay, here you can see Ranavima SCHDB. That's the database we created. So that means we created our database successfully. And let's move on to the next part. The principal has decided to include the information of grade 9 students in the first phase of this software. Create a student table to store student information. Follow the instructions below to create this table. Use DDL Query to create this. Okay. First, I'm going to command the MySQL server to use the specific database we created. To do that, we can use the keyword use and the database name. Use Ranabima SCHD. Okay, database change. That means the queries we are going to execute from now on, those queries will affect uh, to this specific database Ranabima SCHDB. Okay, and now let's create our table. To do that, we can use these keywords create table. I'm going to add some special keywords to this one. If not exists, that means it will create this database only if the name we are going to give this table is not already created in this database. But actually we created the database Ranabima SCHDB few seconds ago. So there's no table here. So it will this table will create anyway. So uh, let's name it. It's better you mention the database name and after that the table name. It's not necessary, but if you it's more relevant if you do that. Ranavime CHDB and then the full stop. Uh, the symbol full stop means the table name. I'm going to enter the table name student, and that means the table student should create inside Ranabima SCHDB. That's the meaning of the symbol full stop. Okay, and then we can create the attributes in our table here. Here's the table name, and these are the attribute names: student ID, first name, last name, gender, contact number, and class. And these are the data types of those attributes. Student ID is int, and also the primary key. PK means primary key, NN means not null, and AI means auto increment. If you watch the previous videos, you already know what these terms are. And first name, last name, those are in Vacha. That means those attributes can store only string values. and the length up to 45 characters. Okay, so let's create our table here. We name the table student, and then the first attribute is student ID, and here I am mentioning the data type int and not null as the option, and also auto increment, and also this is the primary key. And after that we can separate the next attribute using this comma, and here's the next attribute, first name, and it's the data type vacha, and the character length is 45, and also it's not null. And here's the next one, last name, also vacha 45 and not null. And here's the next one, gender, vacha 10 and also not null. And the last two attributes, first one is contact number, and it's in vacha format up to 11 characters, and also not null. And the last one is class in vacha format and up to 10 characters, and also not null. Okay, we complete the query, the DDL query, to create this whole table, and we can execute this one. Here you can see query okay, rows affected, 0 rows affected. That means our query executed without any errors. We can we can view this table uh, by simply using the keyword describe the database name, and then the table name student. Here you can see it's showing the uh, name of the attribute and the types and the not null option, and the key pri means primary key, and extra auto increment. The student id is also auto incremented, and others are not null only, and also vacha. So we completed the second part of our question set, and let's move on to the third one. Create a teacher table to store teacher details. Follow the instructions below when creating the table. Use DDL Query to create this table. Okay, now we have to create another table for storing teacher details. So let's write that query. Create table if not exists in Pranabima SCHDB. We are going to create the table called teacher, and then the first attribute is teacher id, and it's in integer format and not null, Also, auto increment, and it's the primary key. After that, the second attribute is the first name of the teacher. First name, it's in varchar format with up to 45 characters and not null. And the next one is last name, varchar 45, not null. And the next one is gender, same as the student table, varchar 10, not null. And contact number, varchar 11, also not null. And the last one is email, varchar 45, and also not null. And those are all the attributes we have to create in this table. Now we can execute this query here. Query OK, 0 rows affected, and let's see whether this database actually created or not. So describe, sorry, describe in Pranabima SCHDB the teacher table. Okay, here you can see our data is created: first name, last name, gender, contact number, and email, and also their primary, and teacher ID is the primary key and also auto incremented, and it's in integer format. Okay, so we create our two tables here. Now we can move on to the fourth one, which is the last question. Uh, the principal has decided to include the main subject that grade 9 students will learn in the first phase of this software. Create a subject table that will be used to store data. Follow the instructions below to create this table. Use DDL Query to create this table. Okay. Here we have to create another table called subject to store subject details. The attributes are the subject ID and the subject name. So let's create that one. Create table. If not exists, and the database name Pranabima SCHDP, and the table name is subject. Okay, now we can start creating our attributes in this subject table. The first attribute is subject ID. It's in integer format, and it's not, the additional options are not null, and also that Subject ID is auto incremented, and it's the primary key. Okay, here's the next and the last attribute, subject name. It's in Vacha format and up to 45 characters, and additional part is not null. And we can create this table here. Okay, query okay, it means that query is also correct, and we can see our attributes in our table. Describe runabima schdb the subject table. Sorry, there's an error in the subject name, so okay, subject. Okay, here are the two attributes in the subject table, subject ID and subject name. Now I'm going to show you the Heady SQL software, and we can see whether these tables are actually created graphic using this graphical tool. I'm going to show you the database here. I'm going to refresh the database first, and then here you can see the Runabim SCHDB. We didn't use the physical method, the graphical method or the query method to create these tables. We use the DDL language query method, not SQL query. And here are the three tables, and let me show you the details of those tables here. Student ID, integer, and this is the primary key and length 10. And here you can see auto incremented like that. Also the subject table and the teacher table. And these are the methods how to create tables using DDL language. These are the primal language used in the Heady SQL browser, and also the Workbench and other graphical softwares to create databases in SQL language. Okay, and I think that's it for this video. We complete all the parts of question set 45. I will see you in the next one. Thank you very much for watching.